when a homeless girl suddenly yelled, "Don't drink that!" No one could predict the chain of events that followed. The café, a cozy yet refined spot tucked away from the hustle and bustle, was filled with the warm scent of freshly brewed coffee and soft chatter. Patrons, comfortably seated at wooden tables, sipped their drinks in quiet contentment, unaware of the disruption about to unfold. The space was bathed in the golden light of the afternoon, the peaceful ambience perfect for a midday retreat. But everything came to a halt the moment the girl's voice cut through the calm, stopping everyone in their tracks. Thomas Gray, a self-made billionaire, walked into the cafe with the confidence of a man who owned more than just a room. His tailored suit, sharp and immaculate, seemed to speak of years of success and calculated decisions. His gaze swept across the space, assessing each detail as though he were always evaluating his surroundings. Despite the luxury around him, there was a certain distance in his eyes, a disconnect from the warmth and charm of the cafe. He moved with purpose, yet his presence felt almost invisible, absorbed in the way of his wealth and achievements, but detached from the simple joys around him. Outside the cafe, a scruffy young girl named Lily stood leaning against a weathered brick wall. Her clothes were worn, the fabric frayed at the edges, and her appearance was easily overlooked by the patrons inside. She blended into the background, unnoticed by the cafe's elite. Yet her eyes were sharp, scanning the people inside with an intensity that hinted at something deeper than mere curiosity. Her gaze shifted from one table to the next, observing their every move as if she were piecing together a story from a fragment of their lives. There was a quiet urgency in the way she watched, as if she had come for a reason that no one could guess. As Thomas settled into a seat at the table, his attention briefly flickered toward the window. There, standing just outside, was Lily. Their eyes met, and for a moment, everything else seemed to fade away. Thomas felt a jolt of surprise as he was caught in her gaze, a gaze that seemed to cut through the polished veneer of wealth and luxury he surrounded himself with. It was as if Lily could see straight through him, to something hidden just beneath the surface. Her eyes held a quiet intensity, a knowingness that made him uneasy. There was something about her expression, something unsettling that made him wonder. How could a girl like her know something he didn't? As Thomas reached for a glass of water, preparing to take a sip, a sudden sound pierced the air. Lily slammed her hand hard against the cafe window, the sharp noise echoing through the quiet space. Without hesitation, her voice rang out, loud and desperate. "Don't drink that!" The words sliced through the calm, freezing everyone in the cafe. Conversation stopped mid-sentence, and all eyes turned toward her, wide with confusion and disbelief. The room, once filled with a gentle hum of chatter, was now utterly still. Thomas froze, his hand hovering inches from his glass, as the weight of her warning hung in the air. Thomas froze, his glass still inches from his lips, unsure what to do next. The entire cafe seemed to hold its breath as the silence stretched on. Waiters paused mid-step. Patrons stopped chewing or talking, all eyes now on Lily outside. Even Lara, sitting across from Thomas, glanced around in bewilderment, trying to make sense of the situation. The air was thick with confusion, as everyone in the room wondered the same thing. Was this a joke or something more serious? The tension was palpable, but the absurdity of Lily's warning made it hard to decide whether to laugh or be alarmed. It felt so out of place in this world of elegance and luxury that no one quite knew how to react. Lily's heart raced, but there was no turning back. Determined, though trembling with anxiety, she pushed through the crowd, her movements swift and purposeful. She wasn't just some random girl making a scene. This was her chance to stop something terrible, to make him listen. Her footsteps were quiet, but her presence was undeniable as she closed the distance between herself and Thomas's table. Her gaze was fixed on him, her eyes wide with urgency. Each step felt like a battle against doubt, but she was resolute. She wasn't going to back down now. As she reached the table, her breath caught in her throat, but she didn't hesitate. She had to make him understand, no matter the cost. Lily leaned in closer, her voice barely a whisper, but heavy with urgency. "There's something in your drink. It's not just water." The words landed like a shock, causing Thomas's breath to catch in his throat. He stiffened, his mind racing. What could this girl possibly know that he didn't? He studied her face, searching for any hint of deception, but all he found was a deep conviction, a fear that made him question everything. His fingers instinctively tightened around his glass as he glanced down at the water, his mind a whirlwind of doubt and disbelief. Was this some kind of prank? Or was there a deeper truth to her words that he wasn't ready to face? The once calm and composed billionaire was now on edge, torn between skepticism and the unsettling possibility that something was terribly wrong. Lara's eyes narrowed into a glare, her expression hardening as she turned to face Lily. "What are you accusing us of?" she snapped, her voice sharp and dripping with venom. "How dare you speak to him like that?" The words cut through the air, her anger palpable. She stood up from the table, her hand resting on Thomas's arm possessively, as if trying to shield him from the girl outside their world. But Lily didn't flinch. She stood her ground, unwavering despite the venomous glare aimed at her. Her voice was steady, calm but firm as she repeated, "I saw it. She put something in your drink." The weight of her words hung heavily in the air, challenging Lara's defensiveness, while the entire café held its breath, waiting to see how this confrontation would unfold. The atmosphere in the café shifts dramatically, charged with a palpable tension. Patrons who had been quietly enjoying their meals now exchanged nervous glances, murmuring under their breath as their eyes dart back and forth between the confrontation at Thomas's table. The once calm ambience has turned electric, with every eye in the room focused on the drama unfolding. Lara's face is flushed with rage, her fists clenched tightly at her sides as she glares at Lily. But Thomas, normally calm and in control, is no longer so sure. For the first time, a nagging feeling stirs in his gut, an instinct he can't ignore. Something about Lily's words feels true, and despite Lara's heated denials, he can't shake the sense that the girl is not lying. The air thickens with uncertainty, and Thomas's mind races as he struggles to process the gravity of the situation. Thomas's gaze flickered between Lily and the glass of water, his mind a whirlwind of doubt and confusion. His fingers hovered over the rim of the glass, as though the simple act of picking it up had suddenly become a monumental decision. Could Lily be telling the truth? He tried to push the thought aside, dismissing her as just a troubled girl looking for attention. But there was something about the way she looked at him, something in her eyes that made him question everything. Was he really willing to dismiss her warning, or should he investigate further? His pulse quickened as the weight of the choice pressed down on him. The tension in the cafe seemed to build with every second that passed, and Thomas found himself torn between his instincts to trust the life he knew and the unsettling possibility that something was terribly wrong. As the tension reached its peak, whispers turned into hurried calls. A few patrons, sensing the seriousness of the situation, discreetly dialed the police. The wail of sirens in the distance grew louder, sending a ripple of unease through the cafe. Every conversation halted, every gaze fixed on Thomas, who stood up abruptly. The scrape of his chair against the floor echoed through the room, amplifying the growing anticipation. Thomas's eyes locked on the glass of water one last time, his mind racing with uncertainty. Would he finally take a sip, dismissing the warning, or would he wait for the authorities to confirm what he feared? The cafe held its collective breath as the sirens drew nearer, and the inevitable moment of truth loomed closer. The police arrived, their authoritative presence cutting through the tense atmosphere. After a swift investigation, one of the officers carefully examined the glass of water. He leaned in, sniffing the liquid, and then testing it with a small kit. The silence in the cafe deepened as the officer's findings became clear. There was indeed a foreign substance in the drink, something toxic. The truth hit like a hammer. Lara, the woman Thomas had trusted, had been trying to poison him. Her carefully calculated move had been part of a power struggle, a desperate attempt to remove him from the equation. Gasps rippled to the cafe as patrons exchanged shocked glances. The once elegant and composed Lara was now exposed, her deception laid bare for all to see. Thomas stood frozen, his face pale as the full weight of betrayal hit him. Shock and disbelief clouded his expression as he turned slowly to look at Lily. His eyes, wide with gratitude, met hers, but there was also a lingering confusion. How could she have known? How could someone like her, a stranger, have saved his life? Meanwhile, the cafe had erupted into chaos. Police officers escorted Lara, handcuffed and silent, out cafe, her once poised demeanor shattered. Patrons whispered and stared, still processing the shocking revelation. As Lily was gently led away by an officer, Thomas's thoughts raced. He watched her disappear through the door, and despite the gratitude he felt for her intervention, a deeper question gnawed at him. What drove a girl like Lily to intervene in such a dangerous moment? What had she seen, and why had she chosen to step forward? As the dust slowly began to settle, Thomas stood in stunned silence, the weight of what had just unfolded crashing down on him. His hands trembled slightly as he realized just how close he had come to losing everything, his wealth, his power, and his life. The cafe, once buzzing with luxury and calm, was now a quiet, tense space, with patrons still processing the events that had just transpired. His gaze moved to Lily, who was now speaking to the officers, her rough exterior starkly contrasting the polished world she had just interrupted. For the first time in years, a genuine sense of gratitude stirred within Thomas. The girl, with nothing but her instincts and courage, had saved his life. In that moment, the walls of his carefully constructed world seemed to crumble just a little, as he realized that sometimes salvation doesn't come from the people you expect. As the cafe returned to its usual hum, Thomas sat quietly, lost in thought. The events of the day had left an indelible mark on him, one he couldn't shake. His once unwavering confidence in his wealth and status now felt insignificant in comparison to the courage he had witnessed. Despite having everything the world could offer, he realized that sometimes the most important lessons come from unexpected places. Someone from the fringes of society, like Lily, had reminded him of the values he had long overlooked: truth, courage, and integrity. For the first time in a long while, Thomas felt humbled. The lesson was clear. No amount of wealth could replace the strength of character that truly defines a person.